Attention passionate Cleveland, BROWNS. Latest news, something big is happening in the AFC North and it could change the game. We're talking about a direct impact on Cleveland Browns' path to another Super Bowl run, a power shift that could leave a division rival stumbling for years. We're bringing this to you firsthand. But before that, if you're a true Cleveland Browns fan, subscribe to the channel to strengthen this passion even more. Show that you're also part of this family. Let's help each other reach 1,000 subscribers. Share with your FRINDS and Cleveland, BROWNS. Let's get to the news now, folks. If you've been paying attention to the latest buzz around Cleveland, you know that there's a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position. And honestly, that's not surprising when you look at the roster and how the offseason has played out. The Browns, for all their talent and potential, are facing a quarterback situation that's anything but settled. Traditionally, we'd expect a team to have a clear-cut starter, especially heading into the season, but Cleveland's roster is a different story this time. They've got 5 quarterbacks on the offseason roster, and that's a pretty unusual number. It's a sign that the team is still trying to figure out what's best for them, what kind of identity they want to establish under center, and maybe even whether they're in a rebuild or a retooling phase. The whole situation around who's going to lead the team into the 2025 season is complex, but one thing's been pretty clear: veteran Joe Flacco is projected to be the starter when the season begins. At least, that's what the prevailing narrative has been so far. However, not everyone agrees with that plan, and that's where things get really interesting. If you've been following NFL analysts and insiders, you've probably seen some strong opinions about whether Flacco should be the guy to lead Cleveland in 2025. One of the most vocal critics of the current plan is Gary Davenport from Bleacher Report. Just recently, he made some pretty bold statements, saying that Cleveland should seriously consider starting Kenny Pickett instead of sticking with Flacco. That's a pretty big shakeup considering Flacco's experience and the fact that he's the only healthy quarterback on Cleveland's roster right now. But Davenport's point is clear. He argues that Flacco, at 40 years old, might not be the best option for a team that's still trying to build for the future. He points out that Flacco, despite leading Cleveland to the playoffs last year and ending the season with a 4-1 record in the last 5 games, is exactly the quarterback of the future. Davenport emphasizes that Flacco's success last year might have been a bit of a flash in the pan, and that Cleveland needs to see what they have in their younger quarterbacks, especially their draft picks. And that's where the debate heats up. On one side, you have the veteran with a track record of NFL success, someone who's been through the grind and can provide stability in a time of uncertainty. On the other side, you have the young guys like Kenny Pickett, Dillon Gabriel, and SHEDEUR Sanders, who are still raw but could develop into something special. Cleveland, of course, invested in Pickett in the first round back in 2022, and he's shown flashes of potential, but injuries have slowed him down. Dillon Gabriel, who was a 3rd-round pick, has also seen limited action due to injuries and the preseason adjustments. Sanders, the rookie, suffered an oblique injury just recently, and his future role remains to be seen. The team's roster, while talented, isn't exactly loaded with proven NFL starters right now, which complicates their decision-making process. Pause here just for a second. If you want the YouTube algorithm to keep recommending the latest Cleveland Browns news to you, it's super important that you leave a like on this video. Go ahead, it's quick and it makes a big difference. Thank you. Now let us continue with the big reveal. Now let's talk about the implications of this situation. The Browns brought Flacco back on a 1-year deal in April, and it's clear that they value his experience. Flacco spent last season with the Indianapolis Colts, but he's most remembered for his time in Baltimore, where he won a Super Bowl and established himself as a reliable NFL quarterback. Last year, he surprisingly led Cleveland to the postseason, which was a pretty remarkable feat considering the team's struggles earlier in the season. That late-season surge, with Flacco at the helm, gave fans hope that maybe he still has something left in the tank, enough to help Cleveland stay competitive. But as Davenport points out, Flacco's age is a concern. Turning 40, he's not exactly the guy you want to rely on for a long-term rebuild. He's more of a stopgap, someone who can help the team win enough games to stay afloat, but not necessarily enough to secure a playoff run or a future franchise quarterback. And that's the crux of the issue. Cleveland's roster is not built to sustain long-term success with Flacco under center. Injuries to their young quarterbacks have only added to the chaos. Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and SHEDEUR Sanders have all dealt with injuries during August, which is never what you want at this stage of the preseason. Gabriel managed to return and make his preseason debut, but Pickett remains out with a hamstring injury, and Sanders recently suffered an oblique injury. That leaves the team in a tricky spot. If Pickett doesn't recover soon, the Browns might have to start the season with Flacco, which could be seen as a band-aid solution rather than a strategic move for the future. But here's the thing, if Cleveland does decide to go with Flacco as their Week 1 starter, it could have some interesting consequences. You see, Davenport's concern is that Flacco, by winning just enough games, could inadvertently ruin Cleveland's chances of drafting a top-tier quarterback in 2026. The Browns have 2 first-round picks in that draft, their own and Jacksonville's, and they could use those picks to trade up if they find a quarterback they really like. Flacco could help them win just enough to stay in the middle of the pack, but not enough to get a high draft position, and that might delay the team's rebuild plans. On the flip side, if Flacco struggles early on and the team decides to bench him, then Cleveland will have to turn to Kenny Pickett or one of the rookies once again. And that's where things get even more interesting because the team's long-term strategy hinges on these decisions. From a strategic standpoint, Cleveland's management is walking a tightrope. They want to be competitive this season, but they also need to think ahead. The fact that they have 2 first-round picks in 2026 gives them options, whether it's drafting a quarterback or trading those picks to move up and select a franchise guy. But that strategy only works if the team keeps winning enough games to stay relevant, yet not so many that they miss out on a top draft pick. It's a delicate balance, and Flacco's role in all of this could be pivotal. If he plays well enough to give Cleveland a shot at the playoffs, but not so well that they're guaranteed a high draft pick, then the team might find itself in a sort of draft purgatory next spring. Now, I want to touch a bit on the roster and the current state of the team heading into the season. Cleveland's roster, while talented, is still trying to find its identity, especially on offense. The quarterback position is the most critical, and it's understandable why fans are anxious. The coaching staff and front office are clearly trying to evaluate their options, but injuries have thrown a wrench into their plans. Kenny Pickett, as I mentioned, remains sidelined, and the same goes for Sanders. Dylan Gabriel, who has shown some promise, has been limited in practice. The Browns need to see what they have in these young quarterbacks, especially since they invested in Pickett in the first round, and they're looking for that breakout star or at least a reliable starter for the future. And let's not forget the bigger picture here. Cleveland has been a team on the rise in recent years, especially with their strong defense and a solid offensive line. The signing of Flacco and the development of their young quarterbacks are all pieces of a larger puzzle. The team's success this season will depend heavily on how quickly their young guys can develop, how well Flacco can hold the fort if he's the starter, and how the coaching staff manages the roster through injuries and performance issues. Looking ahead, the Browns have a lot to consider. They're in a division with some tough competitors, and every game counts. The AFC North has been highly competitive in recent years, with teams like the Ravens, Bengals, and Steelers always in the mix. Cleveland's goal is to find stability at quarterback, develop their young talent, and make a push for the playoffs. But right now, all eyes are on how they handle the quarterback situation, especially with so much riding on the decisions made in the coming weeks. And of course, fans are eagerly watching every move. Will Flacco start the season? Will Kenny Pickett recover in time? Or will the Browns take a chance on their rookies and hope for the best? These questions are on everyone's mind. The coaching staff has a lot of pressure to get this right, because the window for success in the NFL is always closing, and Cleveland wants to make sure they're not left behind. The draft in 2026 could be a turning point if they manage to draft or trade for the right quarterback, but that's only possible if they position themselves correctly now. In the end, what makes this story so compelling is the uncertainty. It's a classic NFL dilemma. Do you stick with the veteran for stability, or do you gamble on the future with the young guns? And Cleveland, with their current roster, is right at that crossroads. Their decision could define the next few years of Browns football. Will they ride with Flacco and try to win now, or will they focus on developing their young talent and secure a franchise quarterback for the future? No matter what, It's going to be a fascinating season to watch, especially for Browns fans who know how much is riding on every game, every decision, and every snap. And now, Cleveland Browns fans, I want to hear from you. What's your take on this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters so much to us and to the Cleveland Browns. Do you think FLACCO is the right choice to start the season, or should they give more opportunities to Pickett or the rookies? And what do you see as the team's future? Will they find that franchise quarterback in 2026, or will they be stuck in this quarterback limbo for another year? I'd love to hear your insights and predictions because, at the end of the day, it's your passion that keeps the Browns' spirit alive. And don't forget, I'll be back soon with more updates, so stay tuned for the latest Cleveland Browns news.